Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with Investor More, and this is a house I bought a couple of years ago and still own, and it hasn't gone exactly as I hoped it would. It's not the worst situation in the world, but it can give us an example of renting a house you plan to flip, and then, of course, we also have the city complaining to us about the property, and we'll show you what we had to do to avoid a court hearing and going to court, which is always fun as well. Now, hopefully you paid attention to what the yard looked like in that first section because that will become important later on. I bought this house from a wholesaler. It's right across the street from the University of Northern Colorado, so it's often been used as a college rental or a single family rental. And I think we paid $280, $285, I can't remember. But we paid in that range for it. And my plan was to fix it up, sell it, and move on with my life. But that doesn't always happen as planned. Now, this property started out with issues from the beginning. Some of you may remember, it was rented when I bought it. And the tenants who were renting it never paid rent, would not respond to us, wouldn't contact us. And so for a couple of months, we had this property and no rent coming in and nothing happening. So we posted an eviction notice, started that process. And then we thought they had moved out. And this was me walking through the property after they still were not calling us, were not contacting us. So we went in, we had keys to the property, and we're inspecting it, and it certainly looked vacant. And then we rekeyed the property, put a lockbox on it, and the tenants contacted us like 2 days later saying, "What are you doing? Why'd you lock it out of our house?" And like, "Well, you haven't contacted us. You're not living there. Almost all your stuff is gone." And they said, "Well, we're still moving out." So we ended up letting them back in, letting them get their stuff out. And then I think if I remember right, they took the key and didn't give it back to us. And they were just annoying, to say the least. But we got through this process, got the house fixed up, put it on the market. And it being a college rental, we ended up finishing it around August, I feel like. Like the worst possible time you could sell a college rental. You want to sell a college rental in January through like May. So for people who are looking to put in tenants, they want to have time to get it rented for the next year because you rent college rentals pretty far ahead of time usually. Or if someone wants to buy it for their kid who's going to college, they want to have time to buy it, get it all ready, all of that. And so we listed it in the fall, the worst time. And it wasn't occupied, so it was a vacant college rental. So we had a tough time selling it. And that was right when interest rates started going up significantly as well, which really hurt the market. So I believe we had a couple of really low offers, didn't want to do that. And then we had a buyer come along who wanted to do a rent to own. We almost never do that. We try to avoid those. There's actually a lot of scams and ways that buyers can really get screwed over on rent to owns. And I've seen that before. There are some programs that work okay, but it can also be a tricky situation. So we decided to do a rent to own. It wasn't a typical one where their rent would go towards the payment or anything like that. We just said, hey, here's the rent price. You pay the rent. It's just like you're renting the property. And then you've got a year to buy it at this price. And we gave them a price that they could buy it at. And if they were able to buy it in the next year, they could buy it at that price. We couldn't sell it to anybody else, assuming they kept paying rent. So very straightforward. It wasn't like they're paying way more than they should, and some of that's going towards the price or anything like that. We just wanted it real easy and simple. And so things went okay, except they weren't very good at taking care of their yard, which is their responsibility on this property. And it wasn't college students who rented it either. It was actually kind of a family. And so besides the yard, everything was going pretty well. They paid rent and all of that. And then it came time where their lease was going to be up. And we're like, hey, do you guys still want to try to buy this? Like, oh, yes, we're going to buy it. We're going to buy it. Don't worry. And I guess before the problem had been I don't think it's their credit. I think they had another property to sell. They couldn't sell their property or something was going on. And that's why they couldn't buy it. So they said, hey, we're putting our property up for sale. We'll get it up for sale. We'll sell that. Once we sell that, we can buy this property. And we're like, okay. And we looked at the property they had up for sale. Like, this is an extremely overpriced condo in Denver. And so we didn't have our hopes up that they're going to sell it. And we told them that, like, hey, you're not going to sell it at that price. It's way overpriced. And like, well, That's how much we need to buy this one. And we're like, oh, great. So, like, well, if that's the case, we'll probably just end the lease, put the property back up for sale, and move on. And the market had actually improved at the later part of 2023, even though interest rates were, high. The shock had died down. People are still buying houses and even investment properties. And so we thought that would be okay. And they're like, nope, don't. We've got another thing we can do. We're going to refinance the condo. Then we'll get some cash, and then we'll be able to buy the house. I'm like, okay. So we talked to the lender. Lender's like, yep, that should work. That should be okay. So like, all right, we'll extend the lease a little bit, and we'll try and work this and get this going. So we did that. They went through this process, and then a couple of months later, we're like, what's going on? Like, oh, well, the lender said the refinance won't work. And we called the lender, like, yeah, we were wrong. The refinance didn't work. They can't do it. And the buyer's like, or the renter's like, okay, we've got another thing we're going to try. We're going to do this. And they tried something else, couldn't get it done. So eventually, they're like, can we just rent the property for a little bit longer? And we said, yes, but we're raising the rent a couple $100 a month. Otherwise, we're just going to sell it. And they actually agreed to do that and increase the rent a couple $100 a month. So, I mean, we're probably making a tiny bit of money, not much, by doing that. But the market hopefully will improve significantly for this type of property when interest rates go down. Now, there's no guarantee when rates will go down. And this kind of shows the downfalls of just hoping for prices to go up in the future, because they could go up. They also could go down. We don't usually try and do that, except for this unique situation where it's kind of like a rent-to-own, and then it's an income property. It was really hit hard by interest rates. So there are a number of reasons we did it. But the big risk, and we've had guys in here, our contractors have been in there to fix a couple things, and they said it didn't look bad in there. But the biggest risk is that they could destroy a property we just fixed up. So that's where you've got to be really careful when doing this and spending money and renting properties instead of selling them. So make sure you vet your tenants. Make sure you're very careful about that. We did go through a vetting process, credit check, all that before renting to them, even though it was rent to own. So they're still there. They're still renting it. And then we started getting notices from the city. And those were because they had too high of weeds in their yard. And like I said, they're supposed to take care of that. Apparently they do not want to take care of it. So we actually helped them find, one of our landscaping guys started mowing their lawn for them, and they just pay him directly. Well, I guess they stopped doing that this year. The weeds got too high. We got a notice from the city. So like, okay. So we went over, mowed the yard for him, make sure we didn't get a lien, and we thought that was good. Then we got another notice from the city. And this time it's not because the weeds were too high, or maybe the first one was for this reason, we just misread it. It's because we have too many weeds and not enough grass in the yard. It's not because the weeds were too high, it's because there's not enough grass. And I'm wondering if that's because this is on like a main corridor, kind of, 8th Avenue in Greeley, and lots of people drive down it, because there are 1/4 of houses in this neighborhood that just have mowed weeds. And I can't imagine the city is giving all of them notices. Maybe they are, because I know the city has hired a whole lot of people lately and paying them a whole lot of money. And maybe the only thing they can find for them to do is drive around and look for houses with weeds. I'm not sure. But, yeah, that's where we're at. So we went over earlier this week because I guess a court hearing was scheduled because, we had thought we'd take care of it, that we did it. Then we thought, hey, we'll go over, we'll lay some seed, we'll put the sprinklers on it. We've done that on a couple of our flips. It's worked really well. It actually helps the yard significantly. So we did that, took pictures, sent it to the city, said, here you go, we're working on it. And they said, nope, that's not good enough. We still see too many weeds. You need to till, rototill, tear all the weeds out, do the whole yard, and lay sod. And we're like, oh. So, guess what we did yesterday? I didn't do it, but we had our guys go over there, rototill the whole yard, lay sod, and laid mulch on the front. So I have to admit the property looks much, much better now. I'm just hoping the tenants will keep watering it. And we've got to stay on them like crazy to keep the grass green, because we're in Colorado. It's going to be over 100 degrees this week. And the other issue is, for some reason, these tenants just decide not to pay their water bill sometimes. And so the tenants are responsible for water. The city sends them a bill. And then we also get a backup bill if they don't pay it, so we can see if they're not paying it. And most of the time they pay their water bill. That then once in a while they'll just get behind a month or two, and the city threatens to shut off their water. They pay it. Everything's good. Well, of course, right when we lay the sod, the city sends us a notice saying they're turning off the water the next day because they haven't paid their bill. So we went in, actually paid the bill for them, and the fine of like $50. It's only a $194 bill. It wasn't even a high bill, so I don't think they're that far behind. But the city, I guess, is water. I don't know. Anyway, so we paid that for them just so our sod wouldn't die and we could keep the water on it. And then we'll send them a bill for that and let them know, hey, please make sure your water stays on. And we've got the sprinklers on a timer. So unless they mess with that, it should still keep watering it. And I mean, it's a little tricky for the tenant because now they're going to have a higher water bill because they're paying for watering that grass. They really haven't had it the last 2 years. But at the same time, they're supposed to have been taking care of their yard for the last 2 years too and haven't really been doing it. And there was a little bit of grass in there when they rented it. Not a lot. I'm not going to lie. Not a lot, but there was some. But had they been watering it and taking care of it, it probably would have had enough grass to satisfy the city. We probably wouldn't have had these issues. So that's where we're at. This is the week of bad real estate stories for me, talking about different situations like the land that we couldn't sell. I did a short on our worst flip from a couple of years ago. This property, which, we had a tough time selling and then ended up renting, and, it still might work out, but it's not ideal. So we'll see how all this goes. I'm also working on some appraisals on a bunch of properties, and that's been very interesting to say the least. We'll tell that story, but I'm going to wait until we get everything figured out. So that's the house. You can see it had a little bit of grass. That's after we fixed it up. And we will keep you posted on this one, our other flips, our other rentals, the businesses, all of that, and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching.